Did you know that a third tower fell on 9/11? At approximately 5:20 p.m. on September 11, 2001, World Trade Center Building 7 collapsed in 6.5 seconds from normal office fires, according to the government's final report.
World Trade Center 7 collapsed because of fires fueled by office furnishings. It did not collapse from explosives or from fuel oil fires.
Later, the government finally admitted that Building 7 collapsed at the rate of free fall, after trying to deny it. So what's wrong with a building in free fall? What is free fall?
It's just like taking your car keys out and just dropping them. That's how fast the building came down, for over 100 feet.
This is high school physics.
A building cannot do free fall with 40,000 tons of structural steel in its structural system without it being blown up.
The only way that a building can accelerate as it collapses is by having pre-engineered, precisely timed, and precisely placed explosives. In other words, controlled demolition.
Normal office fires not only dropped a steel-framed skyscraper for the first time in history, and did so at free fall, according to the government's report. They also burned hot enough to create the molten metal observed at ground zero.
You'd get down below and you'd see molten steel running down the channel rails, like you're in a foundry.
In an office fire, you cannot generate enough heat to melt steel.
So if you have a flame at 750 degrees, you can hold that flame under a steel beam forever, and you'll never reach a high enough temperature to bend steel, let alone melt it.
First of all, let's go back to your basic premise that there was a pool of molten steel.
Like lava. Like lava. A volcano.
I know of absolutely nobody, and no eyewitness who said so, nobody who's produced it.
John Gross categorically denied their observations. He not only ignored evidence, he denied evidence.
The government acknowledged that Building 7's collapse was unprecedented. Engineers were also stunned. Yet somehow, news networks and many others knew it was going to happen. CNN reported the collapse an hour before it happened.
We are getting information now that one of the other buildings, Building 7, in the World Trade Center complex, is on fire and has either collapsed or is collapsing.
And a few blocks away,
Keep your eye on that building. It'll be coming down. The building is about to blow up. Moving back.
Now, more on the latest building collapse in New York.
The BBC even reported the collapse in detail live from New York over 20 minutes before it happened, with Building 7 still standing in the background. Immediately after Building 7's collapse, FDNY Lieutenant David Restuccio had this to say.
We had heard reports that the building was unstable and that it eventually would either come down on its own or it would be taken down.
CBS veteran anchorman Dan Rather and others also had their first impressions, which were only broadcast on that tragic day.
For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
And I turned in time to see what looked like a skyscraper implosion. It looked like it had been done by a demolition crew. The whole thing just collapsing down on itself.
You don't need to be an engineer or an architect to see what happened to those buildings.
The most obvious hypothesis for anyone looking at the films is that the buildings came down because there was very carefully controlled demolition with high explosives that had been planted weeks, if not months, before.
9/11 claimed thousands of lives and touched millions more. It led us into 2 wars and was used to scale back our civil liberties and invade our privacy. But many people are beginning to question what we were told, and we are demanding answers. So how do we do it? We find our own voices and then we raise them together.
There's been hatred, there's been fear, but there's been no justice for the people who were killed on that day. We must have an inquiry to find out what really happened.
The official accounts of 9/11 are false.
This is so important that you've got to put your usual sources on hold for a while.
You take it slowly, just slowly digest it,
slowly accept it.
When the most likely hypothesis in the case of Building 7 wasn't even mentioned.
They didn't talk about Building 7. Nobody mentioned it. And it wasn't hit by planes. So why did it go down?
What I want to persuade you to do is look into it, right? And make up your own mind.
Rethink 9/11.
Rethink 9/11!
Perth, Australia supports.
Rethink 9/11!
Join us and millions around the world who are now learning about the evidence and uniting to rethink 9/11.
Imagine a business that made a product that killed up to 1/2 of their best customers. It wouldn't kill its users suddenly, but slowly and insidiously through poisons that cause or exacerbate cancer, heart disease, strokes, and lung disease. Imagine that the companies knew their product was deadly and addictive, but kept manufacturing it anyway. Imagine that the companies spent billions of dollars every year to replace their dying customers through advertising campaigns that hook new users, especially young ones, by making the product look fun, sexy, and inviting. Meet the cigarette. Hi, I'm Christy Turlington. If you're a woman who smokes and you want to quit, you're not alone. The fact is that most women who smoke want to quit, but they can't find the time, or they've tried before and they think they can't do it. Or maybe they're afraid they'll gain weight. If you or someone you love smokes, listen up. You can quit, and when you do, you'll know how good it feels to take control of your health. It might be hard, but it's worth it. If you smoke, quitting for good is the single most important thing you can do for a healthy life. I know because I'm one of the women who has kicked the habit. It's one of the best things I ever did.
In view of the continuing and mounting evidence from many sources, it is the judgment of the committee that cigarette smoking contributes substantially to mortality from certain specific diseases and to the overall death rate.
By 2025, 27 years from now, 500 million people worldwide will die of tobacco-related disease. That's a Vietnam War every day for 27 years. That's a Titanic every 43 minutes for 27 years.
How did it happen that this deadly product, claiming the lives of 430,000 Americans each year, became so popular?
You've come a long way, baby.
Introducing new Virginia Slims, the slim cigarette for women only, tailored for the
We may have come a long way in some ways, but when it comes to tobacco, women have taken many steps back.
Today, there are many more deaths in this country each year from lung cancer than breast cancer. Women with breast cancer have 85, 90% 5-year survival rates. For women with lung cancer, it's only about 16% who live 5 years beyond the time of diagnosis.
The #1 cause of cancer deaths in women is lung cancer. The rate of lung cancer in women has increased by 600% in the last 50 years. Beginning in the 1920s and continuing today, tobacco companies have targeted women with aggressive advertising campaigns designed to win them over. The cigarette has been sold as a means for weight control and a symbol of freedom and independence.
Later themes, such as It's a Woman's Thing, or more recently, Find Your Voice, have continued to suggest that the cigarette is somehow a badge of women's freedom. I think the irony is that it's just the opposite.
Cigarettes have been portrayed by Hollywood and the media as a glamorous accessory that will make women seductive and alluring. But the promised freedom and attractiveness turned out to be anything but. The real ploy behind the marketing was to get women hooked on one of the most deadly and addictive substances we know.
It's true.
It won't happen to me.
Lung cancer is a possibility. I do think about that. I have watched things on emphysema, and it's very scary.
I guess it's just not the way I visualized myself dying.
Maybe that sounds weird, but I've always just figured I'll, live till I'm old and get hit by a truck when I'm 70.
My father died of lung cancer. He was 64. It was a senseless death because it could have been prevented. Not everyone who smokes will die from it, but as many as half of all long-term smokers will. Everyone thinks she won't be the one, but why take chances?
I really don't think smoking is bad. That pretty much depends on how often you do it.
Lung cancer, emphysema, heart disease, anybody that thinks that they're going to be able to smoke and won't develop some of these complications or diseases is delusional.
I feel as though that I'm young and there's no way possible I can get lung cancer. I'm only 24.
Meet Pam Laffin, who started smoking when she was just a kid.
I started smoking because I wanted to look older, and I got hooked. Cigarettes gave me asthma and bronchitis, but I couldn't quit. I didn't quit until I got emphysema and had a lung removed. I was 24. I'm 26 now. The medication, which I'll take for the rest of my life, left me with this fat face and a hump on my neck. I started smoking to look older, and I'm sorry to say, it worked.